Hello and welcome to Buy Africa, the show where we focus on investment opportunities around the continent. I'm Tshepho Modiba, and thanks for joining me. Tonight, I'm joined by Dumi Jere, Chief Executive Officer of AfriCatalysts, to talk about the energy requirements for the continent. Dumi, thank you for joining us again.
Pleasure.
This is one of my favorite discussions. Let's recap a little bit on I'm sure things that we have discussed before. What is the outlook in terms of the needs and the opportunities for energy on the continent, and what are the different regional players doing to facilitate that?
Okay, so
a big question.
True. All right. So I think the case for needs cannot be overemphasized as it has been done so far, because we have established there is a need. Right. That also presents a case for the investment side of things. The case has been laid out to them, and it's now a matter of different players coming together and addressing the needs that are there. So there are quite a number of things being done, East Africa, on Southern Africa, as well as West Africa. Right. But these are almost, how can I put them? The efforts, they are not that coordinated throughout all these regions. And so that's where you see the progress differs from the various.
If there was greater coordination, would we likely see further progress across the continent?
No doubt, no doubt. Look, everybody still looking at the continent for development. Right. I think this is the last, well, as they call it, the last frontier. Right. So I think if all these efforts were coordinated enough, then the whole continent, there is so much opportunities. And this speaks to the manufacturing sectors, the construction sectors, and so many other sectors that rely heavily on electricity.
Right. Yeah. And again, the area of focus in terms of where the power is going to come from, is there an increasing focus on renewables? And can the continent afford renewables?
Yes. So there is an increased look at renewables. That's one. In as far as whether the continent can actually meet these, I think it's no lie that the demand that is there for clean energy far outstrips the capacity that African governments can offer. Right. And this is where other players begin to come in from Europe, US, and Asia, and so forth.
Okay. Before delving into the different regions, let's talk a little bit while we're still on it, in terms of the sources of funding for these projects going forward. What are the big sources of fundings that different projects can utilize?
Okay, so I think it just depends with how big a project one is willing to go or wants to go. Right. And most of the times we see that it's public-private partnerships that are working out. It's almost like certain governments need to come in, well, not need to come in, are coming in and providing financial assistance and also loan guarantees and so forth. So there are quite a number of initiatives, and key among them the Power Africa initiative, which President Obama wants to be his legacy. The UK government has got, I think it's the Ministry of International Development. They have got also funding that is in place. Finland, Netherlands, US, quite a number of countries are coming up. And I think they provide the front, and obviously it's a partnership with the other private sector players. Right,
the likes of private equity players and the likes.
Indeed.
In terms of, I guess, across the region, what's being done, what has been the progress in terms of laying the groundworks to actually start seeing increase in electricity supply for the continent? Let's start with East Africa, by all accounts the one that's actually doing the best, and then we can move elsewhere.
Okay, so I think when you look at East Africa, there's quite a number of projects. I think also, as we discussed last time, in Kenya, in Rwanda, focusing heavily on solar. And again...
and has there been further traction on those projects?
Yes. So one of the projects that we discussed last time, we said by September, they were expecting to have done more, and they have done, they have launched phase 2. Right. And that's the Rwanda project that we spoke about. So the phase 2 has been launched. So within a space of a month, there is traction.
Right.
Yeah.
And have they managed to, I guess, maintain budgets, keep within time frame? Clearly, they're ticking those boxes.
Yes. I can safely say so, because usually, most of the times, it's the participation of the other private players that helps these guys meet the projects on time.
Right.
Yeah, so that's what has happened, and that's where we are now.
I guess a question that is relevant for elsewhere in the continent is then what is that project in particular doing well, doing right, that we can learn from in terms of implementation across the continent?
If I were to sum it up, it's I would say, one, they think big, but they start small, and they are practical about it.
Right.
So the other projects, not to speak anything bad about them, but they start with a huge ambition of 100 megawatts and. But with particular reference to the Rwanda project, they started with only 8 megawatts.
Right.
And baby steps. And now the project is growing bigger and bigger and bigger. And before you know it, they'll realize the 100. And
Right.
it has been more achievable. And what do you call this? The changes are evident on the ground, because many households continue to be linked onto the grid. So if other players or other countries, other projects could follow a similar approach, think big, start small, but be practical.
Okay. Moving elsewhere on East Africa, some of the projects that we spoke about before, any other progress or significant progress?
I don't think there has been any other, apart from the Lake Turkana project that we discussed in Kenya.
Yeah.
It's getting more commitments in terms of funding. So that's obviously going to secure the next phase. But as far as the actual traction on the ground is concerned, nothing much has moved from when we last spoke.
What is East Africa doing well? What are they doing right to be so far ahead of the rest of the continent?
Well, I think, like many things in the continent, it starts from the political side of things.
Right.
And they seem to have got that right. And when you compare that East Africa region to SADC and to West Africa, they are more united. The decisions that they make sure they're going to benefit everybody else in the region. Be it tourism, be it energy solutions, be it even technology industries. They make sure everything is going to benefit everyone.
And I guess because they negotiate as a bloc, they have
more power. Yes. So even from an investor perspective, as opposed to just thinking in terms of how many people are in Rwanda, you are now thinking in terms of East Africa as a bloc is about 160 million people.
Right.
So that's how you are approaching your opportunity, your investment decision.
Right.
So that helps.
Right. Moving west, where are we in terms of progress, or are we still waiting for political will to implement some of these stated ambitions?
I think that's where we are, actually. And it's very ironic that most of the, African Development Bank is headquartered in West Africa.
Right.
And they are financing most of the other projects in the continent. But West Africa as a region, again, I think it also speaks to the unity that exists in the East Africa region.
Right.
There seems to be a disconnect in the countries that make up that region. And so it's individual efforts. Each country is trying to do its own thing in solving this problem.
Right.
Without realizing that if you actually form a pack, you are more powerful. So they need to leverage more on each other and off each other.
Okay, so we know what they should do. What is the likelihood for an investment perspective that this greater integration does happen? And I guess from there, what is the likelihood that we'll see significant progress in terms of this key necessity?
I think it would be safer to look at it from a private sector participation,
right.
Because at the just ended US Africa Business Summit, Aliko Dangote, the founder of the Dangote Group, was voted to be on the US Chamber board, almost like representing Africa.
Right.
So through efforts like that, spearheaded by such people, we're going to see more private participation. And at some point, whether government comes in or not, the private will have actually done what needed to be done.
Right.
So if we look at it from that point of view, there is hope that there is something that's going to be achieved from there.
Let's spend a little bit of time on the DRC in particular. They've got a project in partnership with East Africa. What's the progress like on that front?
So I think you're talking about the Inga Dam project.
Yeah.
Yeah, so obviously, again, it's like I said, in most of these projects, it's done in phases. So phase 1 is almost there.
Yeah.
But the next phases 2 and 3 and going forward, I think there's just been commitments of more funding, but not actual traction on the ground again. This could speak to the political instability that is currently being experienced in DRC.
Sure.
So there is that to consider before you put more money in that. So that's why there hasn't been that much traction with regards to that.
Perfect. Let's leave it there. Thanks to my guest, Dumi Jere, Chief Executive Officer of AfriCatalysts. That's all from Buy Africa this week. Remember to follow me on Twitter. That's at Modiba_Tshepho, and send us your thoughts about the show using the hashtag BuyAfrica. From myself and the team, goodbye.